So let's start with how you came, or I should say, maybe William Thompson, a professor emeritus of criminology at UCal Irvine, came to be aware of this secretive genetic surveillance program.
Yeah, so Professor Thompson has been sort of a DNA wonk for decades. And so among the Irvine community and beyond. And so when things are kind of going on, people have questions, they often come to him. And so one day he was outside his house, and a neighbor who was also a professor at UC Irvine kind of approached him with this story about how she, would sometimes walk her dog off the leash, which is technically illegal in Orange County in Irvine. And she got popped for it. And she thought she was going to be able to go to the courthouse, pay this $100 fee for the first offense, and that would be that. But when she got down to the courthouse, they basically told her that they were going to increase the charge to a higher level misdemeanor unless she agreed to give up her DNA. And so we're talking about a full, genetic profile here. If they didn't, they would have to swab her cheek. It was the only way she could get out of it. And Thompson and another professor named Simon Cole kind of began hearing these stories from students as well. It's not surprising that they might end up in, trouble with the law on minor offenses occasionally. So more and more people were coming into him saying, hey, they won't get rid of this case unless I give them DNA. And in fact, they're threatening to increase the charge if I don't do that.
So there's really three elements to this that are sort of surprising. A, that the prosecutors would insist upon a genetic sample for misdemeanors. B, that they would threaten to increase the charges if they didn't get this sample. And C, that they have something that they would use this stuff for, that they have. I mean, this is really basically what this story is about. All three of these things are wrong, I guess, or at the very least, if someone wants to be extremely generous, I don't, but I will allow for that these are very, very uncommon and atypical, and perhaps outside of the realm of legal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only database of its kind run by a prosecutor that anybody knows of. Police departments have had their own DNA databases in the past, things like left behind DNA and various, sort of samples that they come across. But this is like huge. This is a very vast, there are more approximately, we don't know right now, but last time if somebody checked, there were about 200,000 profiles of people in there. And again, it's important to understand that if you go to a crime scene and you find DNA there, say blood or saliva, and that's collected and tested, it's tested against various parts of the genome that don't encode proteins. They're called junk DNA. They have function, but they don't encode proteins. So they don't give away a lot of information, private information about the person whose DNA it is. When you take a cheek swab, which is what they're doing here, you get the entire sequence. So you get to know a lot about people's medical histories, propensities for disease, all kinds of things that I think rightly people should want to kind of protect. And so here, that's what they're taking, and then predicating this, taking this predicated on getting rid of a criminal case. I think the part of that that's also important is, we've had DNA databases for a very long time, and you can feel however you want to about them. But they're generally regulated very highly by states. They have very strict sort of quality assurance parameters. They're usually mandated only for people who have been accused of very serious crimes or convicted of very serious crimes. And even in those cases, there is generally a way for somebody to get their profile out of the database in certain circumstances. So say you're charged with murder and you're acquitted, then your DNA profile can get out of that database. In Orange County, these are from the lowest level things like walking your dog off a leash, minor drug possession. It could be anything, to driving without a seatbelt. And in Orange County, there's no mechanism for a person to ever have their DNA removed from this database, regardless of whether they're actually convicted of the crime.
There's a lot in there to unpack, and a lot of it is, I find, stunning. But let's go back a little bit to give people sort of a broader context. Let's talk about CODIS. What is CODIS? And I mean, just so that we get a sense of what has existed out there in the way that it's been used and what has been sanctioned under our, I guess our criminal procedures and criminal law. So
yeah,
what that is.
Sure. CODIS is the combined DNA index system. It's run by the FBI, and it basically links up statewide databases, again, that are created by statute, that are highly regulated and have quality assurance parameters incorporated within them. So when you swab your DNA, it's being run against the entire genome, the entire sequence. The way that forensic profiling works is they test at very specific, what are called loci. And the ones that are accepted and that are commonly and uniformly tested for are along strands that don't encode proteins. So they don't contain lots of private, for example, medical information about us. They do have function in the genome, but they just don't contain that much rich personal identifying information.
So in other words, it's not the sample, it is the process that the sample is exposed to that is
correct.
Okay. So it's not just the fact that they swab it in your cheek, it's that they are specifically assessing things beyond what they would need even to just simply identify you.
Certainly. Yes, absolutely. I mean, they don't, I guess I suppose that's a good point. I mean, even if they were going to swab your cheek, I suppose they could develop only at the loci that we use in forensic samples, which are those left behind at crime scenes, and not the entire sequence that has, all these things about propensity for disease or those kinds of things that you can find out. As they say, it's sort of a treasure trove of information about a specific individual.
I was going to say, when I started off by saying there's, A, B, and C things that are wrong with this, but we're starting to get into D and E here too, because they're taking, if you're going to make an analogy between the DNA and a fingerprint, it sounds sort of like what's happening in Orange County is that they're not just taking a fingerprint, they're taking maybe not even just the hand, they're taking, the torso,
Right.
and they're examining things that they don't even need to examine if it's a question of just simply identifying you.
That's correct. I think that's right. Absolutely.
And so, okay, let's just start there. What's their justification for taking that much information as opposed to, and I don't want it to sound like I'm justifying the mechanism in which they take this information in the first place, or that they should take any information. But why are they taking so much more information than the feds and police agencies and have required to identify potential criminal IDs in the past?
Well, I mean, to be fair, when you are subject to giving your DNA, say in a felony case, you're convicted of murder, you're arrested of murder, charged with murder, and you have to give a DNA sample, they are taking your full sample at that point. The crime scene evidence, but I think it's still a valid point, which is why would you need to collect the entire genome versus the specific portions of it, which we traditionally look at when we're looking at crime scene evidence? And I think it's a very good question. Now, as it applies to Orange County, anybody's guess, because they basically refuse to talk about this. They've been very secretive about it. Researchers have been kind of concerned about how the demographic breakdown might look. Who is in this database? How many white men? How many white women? How many people of color? Who is in here? They refuse to give up any of that information. I mean, it's anybody's guess at this point. And they don't like to talk about it. So, it's a very good question. It would be nice for them to answer.
Hi, I'm Sam Seder. You can watch the rest of this interview and more on our Peacock show, which streams at 5 p.m. weekdays on The Choice from Peacock TV.